Welcome to the quiet charm of the Cotswolds, where the teapots never cool and the secrets never quite stay buried. We'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Do tell us in the comments below. And if these cozy mysteries keep you company in the evenings, do subscribe. It helps us brew up the next case for you. Now then, shall we begin? The drizzle had been falling all afternoon, one of those thin, pitiless rains that seemed to have been invented purely to remind English villages of their sins. Castley's stone cottages glistened like washed potatoes, and the hedgerows drooped under the weight of water. Agatha Raisin sat by her sitting-room window, chin in hand, glaring at the view as if sheer irritation might part the clouds. She had returned from London 3 weeks earlier, full of vague plans to get back into village life, but had instead discovered that village life had managed quite comfortably without her. The Castley Ladies' Society had met twice and hadn't asked her to chair even a subcommittee. Worse still, Mrs. Bloxby, the vicar's wife, had tactfully hinted that perhaps Agatha might enjoy a quiet spring after so much excitement last year. Quiet was all very well for monks. For Agatha Raisin, it was intolerable. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked with maddening politeness. She poured herself another glass of wine, good French naturally, and considered that her career as Castley's most talked-about woman was beginning to feel distressingly like retirement. When the doorbell rang, she started so violently that some of the wine sloshed onto her sleeve. Mrs. Bloxby, serene beneath her sensible waterproof, stood smiling on the doorstep. "I thought you might be lonely," she said gently. "I'm not lonely," snapped Agatha. Then, because Mrs. Bloxby's eyes were too kind, added, "Just understimulated. Come in." They sat in the sitting-room, Mrs. Bloxby with her hands folded, Agatha braced against the cushions like a general forced into diplomacy. "You've heard about the reopening of the Hare and Barrel?" asked Mrs. Bloxby. Agatha blinked. "The what?" "The old inn by the Mercester Road. It's been renovated by a new owner, a Mr. Gavin Kent. Rather modern, apparently, but everyone's talking about it. The grand reopening is tomorrow evening." Agatha perked up as a foxhound sense movement. "Everyone's talking about it," Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "So I hear. The parish council is sending a little delegation. I expect the entire village will be there." Agatha could already imagine it. A crowd of self-satisfied villagers, drinking cheap Prosecco and pretending to be cosmopolitan. And she, sweeping in with impeccable hair, a touch of perfume, and just enough mystery to make them whisper again. "Well," she said briskly, "it would be rude not to attend. Support for local enterprise and all that." Mrs. Bloxby's eyes twinkled. "Of course." When the vicar's wife had gone, Agatha stood before the mirror, examining her reflection critically. Perhaps something a little understated, though understated was not her natural idiom. She tried a navy dress, decided it made her look managerial, and settled instead on black with a daring neckline and pearls. Classy, she told her reflection, like a woman who's been places and has the stories to prove it. The next evening, Castley seemed transformed. The drizzle had thickened to a fine mist and the inn's windows glowed through it like jewels. Bunting flapped damply in the breeze, and laughter spilled from the doorway. Agatha, stepping out of her hired taxi, adjusted her umbrella and braced herself. Inside, the old Hare and Barrel had been reborn. Wood panelling polished to a mirror sheen, soft lighting, and the faint smell of money well spent. The crowd was thick with villagers dressed slightly above their means. Agatha spotted familiar faces. Mrs. Friedman from the greengrocer's, the vicar and his wife, and Len Fisher, the stout landlord of the Red Lion, glowering into his pint like a man at his own funeral. "Agatha!" cried Mrs. Friedman, waving a sausage roll. "You look grand." Agatha smiled graciously. It was, she thought, the first honest compliment she'd had in months. Then the crowd parted, and the new owner appeared. Gavin Kent was the sort of man who seemed designed to make women notice him. Tall, tanned, and impeccably dressed in a way that suggested he ironed his own shirts and enjoyed doing so. He moved from group to group with a smile that promised everything and meant nothing. When he reached Agatha, she extended her hand. "Agatha Raisin, welcome to Castley." "Ah, yes," he said smoothly, giving her hand a perfunctory shake. "I've heard of you." Something in his tone made her bristle. "All good, I trust?" He smiled, the kind of smile that could frost glass. "Let's just say, memorable." And with that, he turned away to charm Mrs. Friedman. Agatha's jaw tightened. There were men one could flirt with, men one could ignore, and men who deserved a lesson. Gavin Kent was definitely in the third category. As she sipped her wine and observed, her irritation softened into curiosity. People whispered about the new owner, how he'd bought the inn for a song from a widow who'd gone abroad under odd circumstances. The way they said odd made it sound almost indecent. "Probably tax exile," said Agatha aloud. "Who?" asked a voice behind her. Martha, the quiet barmaid, stood with a tray of empty glasses. She had the look of a woman accustomed to silence, plain, tidy, with watchful eyes. "Mr. Kent," said Agatha, smiling, "your boss. Seems quite the success story." Martha's fingers tightened on the tray. "Success has a cost," she said softly. Before Agatha could ask more, Gavin's voice cut through the noise, crisp with annoyance. "Martha, a word, now!" They disappeared into the corridor leading to the kitchen. A few moments later, Agatha, passing near the doorway, caught fragments of their argument. "You promised me." Martha's voice trembled. "Enough," Gavin snapped. "Not here." Agatha paused, heart quickening. Promised her what? Money? Love? A partnership? There were few promises that provoked that tone. She stepped discreetly back as they emerged. Gavin composed, Martha pale and trembling. When he caught Agatha's eye, he gave her a thin smile that might have meant anything. Later, over her second glass of Prosecco, Agatha related the incident to Charles Fraith, who had arrived fashionably late and damp. "A lover's quarrel, no doubt," said Charles, "or perhaps he's juggling the accounts as well as the barmaids." "Don't be crude," said Agatha, "though you might not be wrong." "My dear Agatha," said Charles, "I'm never wrong about human weakness. It's my chief interest in life." When the evening drew to a close, Agatha lingered longer than she intended, savouring the sensation of being once again at the centre of things, or at least observing the centre from a strategically flattering angle. As she stepped outside, thunder grumbled low over the Cotswold hills, and the rain resumed in earnest. Her taxi had yet to arrive. Pulling her coat tight, she turned back toward the inn to check if the driver had been delayed. Through an upstairs window, she saw Gavin Kent watching her. His expression was unreadable, not the suave charm of earlier, but something colder, intent. When he realized she'd seen him, he turned away, and the curtain fell back into place. Agatha shivered, though whether from the rain or the look she could not have said. "Well," she muttered to herself as the taxi headlights appeared at last, "he's either smitten or homicidal. Either way, it should be interesting." And with that, she climbed into the cab, already planning what she'd wear for her next visit to the Hare and Barrel in mourning, arrived with that false brightness particular to the Cotswolds, a pale, deceitful light that promised spring but smelt faintly of damp cellar and disappointment. Agatha Raisin, blinking against it, groaned. Her head throbbed with the dull persistence of a church bell, and one of her earrings had gone missing in what she vaguely remembered as the toasts portion of last night's festivities. Still, she had attended worse parties and survived. With a heroic cup of coffee in hand, she was just beginning to contemplate a restorative bacon sandwich when her phone began to vibrate across the counter like an agitated beetle. "Agatha," came Mrs. Friedman's voice, breathless with excitement. "Have you heard? That handsome innkeeper, Gavin Kent, he's dead." Agatha blinked. "Dead? Dead as anything. Found at the bottom of his own cellar stairs. They say he must have been drunk, poor man. Imagine all that money spent on renovations and then splat." Agatha's hangover evaporated like mist. "I'll be there in 10 minutes, she declared, slamming the phone down and immediately regretting it when her skull thudded in protest. 10 minutes later, she was striding through the village, coat thrown over her shoulders and last night's heels still on. The drizzle had turned the lanes slick, but she took no notice. Already the good citizens of Carsley had gathered outside the Hare and Barrel, muttering with the solemnity of mourners and the glee of spectators. "Terrible thing," murmured old Mr. Jessup. "Didn't even get to see the sun come out again, poor devil." "They say he tripped," offered another. "Or maybe he was pushed. You never know." "You never do," said Agatha darkly, sweeping past them. Inside, the inn was unrecognisably subdued. The smell of last night's wine still lingered, mingled now with something faintly metallic, the unmistakable scent of tragedy or possibly cheap cleaning solution. 2 uniformed officers stood by the cellar door, and a small knot of curious villagers peered in from the hallway. Inspector Wilkes, an earnest man with the expression of someone perpetually trying to recall where he'd left his umbrella, emerged from the cellar wiping his hands. "Morning, Mrs. Raisin," he said. "No need to worry yourself. Looks like misadventure. He must have lost his footing on the stairs after one too many glasses." Agatha eyed him. "Misadventure? Nonsense. Men like Gavin Kent don't tumble downstairs without a reason." "You think he was pushed?" Wilkes asked mildly. "I think," said Agatha, "that you won't know until you stop assuming he was clumsy. May I?" Without waiting for permission, she stepped toward the cellar. The air was cool and stale. A thin smear of wine stained the stone floor, dark against the grey. Her eyes caught a small detail, a wristwatch lying near the bottom step, its glass cracked. The hand stopped at 20 to 12. "He didn't die instantly," she murmured. "Or if he did, time did." "We found that near his hand," said Wilkes, scribbling notes. "Probably broke in the fall." Agatha crouched to sniff the spilled wine. It had a sharp, acrid scent, quite unlike the sparkling rosé served the night before. "This isn't champagne," she said. "It smells like cleaning fluid." Wilkes raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Raisin, are you suggesting foul play by disinfectant?" "Don't be obtuse. I'm suggesting he may have been poisoned before the fall. Or perhaps he was cleaning and drinking simultaneously, which would amount to the same thing." "You read too many detective novels," said Wilkes. "And you read too few," Agatha retorted. At that moment, Martha, the barmaid, appeared at the top of the stairs, pale and shaking. "They told me I could collect his things," she whispered. He always wore that watch." Agatha regarded her closely. Martha's hands trembled as she folded a bar towel. Her eyes darted away when Agatha asked, "Did you see him after the guests left?" "No," Martha said quickly. "He told me to lock up. I left before midnight." "How convenient," murmured Agatha. Now, Wilkes interrupted. "Let's not interrogate witnesses, Mrs. Raisin." Agatha sniffed. "Witnesses who lie are suspects, Inspector. That's basic policing." Wilkes looked heavenward, as if asking for patience in bulk. "We'll run the usual checks. For now, I'm treating it as an accident." "Of course you are," said Agatha sweetly. "Wouldn't want the paperwork." By the time she returned home, she had dried off enough to find her reflection disagreeable. Mascara smudged, hair rebelling in all directions, and the faintest trace of cellar dust on her sleeve. She was just about to change when her phone rang again. "Darling," cried Roy Silver from London, "I've just seen the news. Are you in the thick of it again, or are you simply inventing corpses now to keep yourself amused?" Agatha rolled her eyes. "Don't be ridiculous, Roy. It's a perfectly real corpse. I saw it myself." "You would," he said cheerfully. "Can't resist a dead man. They can't argue back." "Go polish your ego somewhere else," said Agatha. "Some of us are contributing to society by detecting the truth." "Or manufacturing it," Roy teased. "Honestly, Aggie, the Cotswolds must be the only place on earth where people are murdered between scone tastings." "Goodbye, Roy," said Agatha firmly and hung up. Still, his words pricked. She wasn't chasing drama for the sake of it. Not entirely. Casterly could be dull, yes, but she genuinely felt the itch of curiosity, that restless need to know. Gavin Kent had been far too self-assured, too deliberate, to meet such an end by mere misstep. By afternoon, the drizzle had turned to steady rain. Agatha, now properly dressed and armed with an umbrella, returned to the inn under the pretext of collecting her forgotten scarf. The police had finished their work, leaving behind yellow tape and a faint air of embarrassment. The barroom was empty but for Martha, who was wiping the counter mechanically. Her eyes were red. "Hard day?" asked Agatha, softening her tone. Martha nodded mutely. "You must have known him well," Agatha went on. "He gave me a chance when no one else would," Martha murmured. "Said he believed in second starts. He didn't deserve this." There was such quiet conviction in her voice that Agatha hesitated. Perhaps the girl was simply grieving. Then again, grief often made good cover. Her gaze drifted toward the cellar door. The wooden boards had been mopped, but faint traces of mud still clung to the threshold. Not the broad, messy prints of police boots. These were smaller, neater, deliberate. The sort made by tidy shoes. Women's shoes, perhaps. She crouched, pretending to adjust her hem, and traced one with her finger. Still damp. "Martha," she said casually, straightening, "do you keep an herb garden behind the inn?" "Yes, miss," said Martha, startled. "Time, Rosemary, that sort of thing." "Lovely," said Agatha, turning toward the door. "I've always thought Rosemary was for remembrance, though one must be careful what one remembers." Outside, the rain eased into a fine mist again. Agatha stood a moment, watching the puddles tremble under the drip from the eaves. Somewhere behind her, the village clock struck 12. She smiled faintly. "An accident, was it?" she murmured. "We'll see about that." As she walked away, she cast one last glance at the neat line of footprints leading from the cellar door toward the herb beds. Small, precise, and far too intentional to belong to misadventure. The rain had cleared overnight, leaving Carsley with that washed, glistening look the English countryside adopts after scandal, deceptively innocent. The air smelled of wet earth and gossip. Agatha Raisin, wrapped in her best belted mac, and armed with her handbag like a weapon of war, strode toward the vicarage, determined to take tea, which in Agatha's lexicon meant extract intelligence. Mrs. Blocksby greeted her at the door with the serenity of one who had already made peace with the day's chatter. Inside, the sitting room was full. Mrs. Friedman, Doris Simpson, and the redoubtable Miss Partlet, all leaning forward like sparrows round crumbs. The vicar's wife smiled diplomatically. "We were just discussing poor Mr. Kent," she said, pouring tea as though mourning and muffins naturally went hand in hand. "Poor Mr. Kent," exclaimed Mrs. Friedman, buttering a scone with the righteous vigour of one defending the truth. "It's tragic, of course, but he wasn't what I'd call steady. Champagne at his own opening, imagine. He must have been half cut before midnight." "Nonsense," said Miss Partlet. "I heard from my nephew, who knows one of the constables, that the cellar light was out. He tripped. Pure accident." "Accident, my foot," Doris declared, pink with excitement. "I heard Martha was crying in the street that very morning. People don't cry like that over mere accidents." Agatha sipped her tea, eyes narrowed. "Martha again," she said. "That girl's either innocent or guilty of everything." "Agatha," murmured Mrs. Blocksby kindly, "you do leap to conclusions faster than anyone I know." "Someone has to leap," said Agatha crisply. "Otherwise they all just stand about wringing their hands and eating jam." "Still," Mrs. Blocksby said gently, "perhaps we might let the police do their work." "Inspector Wilkes wouldn't recognise a clue if it bit his ankle," Agatha retorted. "The man thinks fingerprints are optional." The room tittered. Agatha basked for a moment. She did so enjoy a well-timed barb, before turning her attention back to the gossip. "Who else was seen with Kent that night?" Mrs. Friedman exchanged a meaningful glance with Miss Partlet. "Well, there was Diana Purvis, that blonde woman from Mercester. Quite a picture, if you like that sort of thing. She was all over him during the speeches. You could smell her perfume from the car park." "Yes," said Doris. "And Tom Pemberley, too, the antiques man. They were whispering by the fireplace before it all started. Looked like they were discussing money. Len Fisher said Gavin owed him for catering stock, but that's Len. He's jealous because his pub's losing trade." Agatha's eyes brightened. "So we have envy, debt, and lust, all the good motives accounted for." "Agatha," said Mrs. Blocksby, half amused, half weary, "it's not a crime novel." "It will be if I have anything to do with it," Agatha muttered. When the gathering finally broke up, Agatha lingered, watching Mrs. Blocksby clear the cups. "You don't really think it was an accident, do you?" Mrs. Blocksby paused, then smiled faintly. "I think people often get what they run toward, or away from, but the truth will come, whether we chase it or not." Agatha found that irritatingly profound. She preferred her truths obtained by persistence and the occasional bit of eavesdropping. Outside, the afternoon had grown bright, sunlight glancing off wet stone. Agatha walked briskly through the square, her mind spinning through suspects like cards in a deck. Martha, too emotional. Len Fisher, jealous. Diana Purvis, dangerous in lipstick and heels. And Tom Pemberley, slippery that one. A man who sold antique mirrors for a living was bound to know something about distortion. She decided she'd had quite enough tea and speculation. What was needed now was legwork, or better, someone else's. Charles Fraith answered the phone on the third ring, his voice languid as honey. "Aggie, darling, to what do I owe this intrusion?" "You owe me the pleasure of your company," she said briskly. "I'm reopening the investigation." "Which one?" "The only one that matters. Gavin Kent, the man at the inn. Dead under mysterious circumstances, and the police are treating it like a pratfall. I need a proper ally." "Ah," said Charles, "so you want me to drive you about, pay for lunch, and provide light flirtation. Don't be vulgar. You can pay for dinner as well." "Sold," said Charles. By late afternoon they were on their way to the Hare and Barrel. The inn looked gloomier than ever, shutters half drawn, its sign creaking faintly in the wind. Martha stood in the doorway like a sentry, arms folded, her face pinched. "We're closed," she said flatly. Agatha's eyes narrowed. "I'm not here for a drink. I'm here for information." "The police have taken what they need." "Yes, and left what they don't. Sense," Agatha muttered. "I was a guest here that night. I may remember things you've overlooked." "Then tell the inspector," said Martha, turning away. "She's lying," murmured Charles as they climbed the steps after her. "Of course she's lying," said Agatha, "but badly, which means she's scared." Inside, the bar smelled of polish and grief. Agatha glanced around, noting the faint scratches on the floor where tables had been moved. A glass still gleamed wet on the counter. The atmosphere was heavy, like a secret refusing to air itself. "You've redecorated since last night," Agatha said lightly. Martha didn't answer. Charles, ever the aesthete, examined the surroundings with mock interest. "Lovely mirror," he said, nodding toward the large gilt frame at the top of the staircase. Agatha looked up. The mirror was indeed impressive, tall, oval, with a gilt border carved in curling vines. But as she stepped closer, she saw a faint hairline crack running from one edge to the other, like a vein beneath glass. "That wasn't there before," she murmured. "Before what?" asked Charles. "Before the fall," said Agatha. "I remember it perfectly. It was pristine. I even checked my lipstick in it." "Vanity saves the day again," Charles said cheerfully. "Mock all you like, but that crack might mean something. Mirrors don't break themselves." "Perhaps it fell when he did," said Charles. "Or perhaps someone threw something, or someone at it." Martha, standing at the bottom of the stairs, shifted uneasily. "We're closing now," she said. Agatha looked down at her. "You've said that already." "Then perhaps you should listen." There was such quiet desperation in her tone that Agatha hesitated. "We'll be back," she said finally, and meant it. Outside, the wind had risen, scattering petals from the nearby cherry trees across the gravel. Charles offered Agatha his arm with mock gallantry. "You know, darling, there's a simple explanation for all this," he said. "The man drank too much, slipped and met an unromantic end. Happens every week." "Rubbish," said Agatha. "Men like Gavin Kent don't die neatly. There's always an aftertaste." "Like cheap wine," Charles murmured. She gave him a sideways glance. "You're enjoying this." "Of course. Nothing so diverting as your moral outrage in motion." Agatha ignored him, looking back once more at the inn's windows. Dark, watchful, secretive. Behind the upstairs curtain, something moved, or seemed to. Perhaps it was only the reflection of a tree branch, or perhaps the inn itself was watching her. "Come on," said Charles. "You can interrogate me over dinner." "Don't tempt me," she said, following him toward the car. As they drove away, the cracked mirror caught the last shard of sunlight, flashing once like a signal, unnoticed by anyone but Agatha, who turned in her seat just in time to see it fade. She smiled grimly. "Cracks always show what's underneath," she murmured, "and I intend to find out what that is." The next morning arrived with a shy, watery sun, the sort that tried to convince the Cotswolds it was spring while everyone else knew better. Agatha Raisin, already in her tweed jacket and determination, was on the road to Mercester before most of Castley had buttered their toast. Charles Fraith, riding shotgun in her car, lounged as though being driven about by an irate woman in middle age was one of life's finer luxuries. "You're awfully chipper for someone chasing ghosts, Aggie," he remarked. "I'm chasing facts," she said, gripping the wheel. "That mirror didn't crack itself. Gavin Kent's death and that antique are connected. I can smell it." "You're smelling your own perfume. My eyes are watering." "It's called Sublime Essence, and it cost more than your entire wardrobe," she snapped. "Then it's a steal," murmured Charles. They drove through the countryside in companionable irritation until the sign for Pemberley Antiques appeared, a neat little shop wedged between a bakery and a solicitor's office, its window displaying clocks, brass lamps, and a faint air of deceit. Inside, the shop smelled of polish and quiet panic. Behind the counter stood Tom Pemberley himself, thin, dapper, and far too careful in his movements. His tie was immaculate, but his eyes darted like a rabbit's. "Good morning," said Agatha brightly. "I was admiring that mirror at the Hare and Barrel the other night, the large gilt one. It caught my eye." Tom smiled tightly. "Ah, yes, lovely piece. Belonged to the inn, I believe. Not part of my stock." "Funny," said Agatha. "The owner mentioned your name in connection with the renovation. Something about you helping him source quality period fittings." "Oh, perhaps," Tom said airily, adjusting a vase. "We discussed a few things. That mirror was just decor. Worthless, really." Agatha tilted her head, cat-like. "Worthless? I thought it was rather fine. Crack now, sadly." That hit. Tom froze for a fraction of a second before resuming his professional smile. "Cracked, you say? How unfortunate. I do hope he had it insured." Charles, leaning on the counter, added lazily, "Strange thing, mirrors, always showing what we don't wish to see." Tom's smile flickered. "Indeed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an appointment." "Of course," said Agatha sweetly. "Just one more question. You didn't happen to sell him anything else? Perhaps a matching frame or a chest of drawers?" "No," Tom said quickly. "Nothing else. As I said, just decor." Agatha's lips twitched. "You're sure it wasn't part of a set?" He hesitated. "No set. Good day, Mrs. Raisin." Outside, the air felt fresher, as though the shop had exhaled relief behind them. Charles slipped his hands into his pockets. "Well, that was masterly. You've managed to annoy him without learning a thing." "I learned he's hiding something," said Agatha. "The nervous ones always are. That mirror meant more to him than he'd admit." "Perhaps he's just afraid of middle-aged women in tweed questioning his decor." "Middle-aged detectives, thank you," said Agatha. They drove back to Carsley, the sky greying once again. By the time they reached the village, Agatha's mood had curdled into frustration. She dropped Charles at his house, "Call me if you need charm, darling," and decided to make a social call at the Red Lion. Len Fisher, the landlord, was polishing a glass behind the bar with more enthusiasm than success. His cheeks were ruddy from years of proximity to his own product. "Ah, Mrs. Raisin," he said, eyeing her warily. "You'll be wanting the usual?" "I'll have a half of cider," she said. "And the truth, if it's on tap." He chuckled nervously. "You've been talking to Wilkes, have you? He's already asked me if I had it in for Gavin Kent." "Did you?" "Course not. I just didn't like the man. Strolled in with his fancy cocktails and imported beers, turning my regulars' heads. Said I was old-fashioned. I told him tradition was the backbone of English drinking." "And what did he say?" "He laughed, the smug sod." Agatha took a sip. "You threatened him, didn't you?" Len froze mid-polish. "Now that's unfair." "You did. Someone saw you at the inn the night he died." Len's face darkened. "I might have popped in, yes. Told him he'd best watch himself, taking business from honest folk. But I didn't touch him. He was alive when I left." "At what time?" 11:30, maybe later. "Look, I'd had a few. You know how it is." "No," said Agatha. "I don't." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Between you and me, that Martha girl was there late. Lights were still on after midnight. She was in the back garden when I passed. I saw the shadow." Agatha's pulse quickened. "What were you doing, wandering past the back garden at midnight?" "Looking for my dog," he said, far too fast. "Ah," said Agatha. "How convenient." "You're making me sound guilty," he protested. "If the pint fits," she said, tossing back the last of her cider. Outside, the sky had gone pewter again, and a chill wind tugged at her scarf. She pulled her coat tighter, mind racing. The broken watch, the cracked mirror, the trembling hands of Martha, threads of something she couldn't yet untangle. That evening, with the village quiet and only the faint hum of the television for company, Agatha sat in her armchair with a notebook on her lap. The page bore 3 words in capital letters: watch, mirror, vanity. All symbols of self-regard, she murmured to herself. A man obsessed with appearances, killed in a place full of reflections. Perhaps the mirror was hiding something, or someone. Her cat, Hodge, yawned audibly, unimpressed. Agatha glared at him. "Don't sneer. I've solved harder cases than this." Still, a small pang of loneliness tugged at her chest. She thought of Mrs. Bloxby's gentle warnings, of Bill Wong's patient frown, of Charles's effortless detachment. Everyone around her seemed to know who they were. Agatha, for all her bravado, sometimes suspected she did not. A sound outside broke her reverie, the distant hum of a car. She rose, went to the window, and saw the faint lights of the Hare and Barrel through the drizzle. Something, instinct or sheer nosiness, compelled her to grab her coat again. At the inn, the main door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelt faintly of soap and sorrow. The bar was half lit and Martha stood behind it, polishing glasses that were already spotless. Her hands trembled with each movement. "You'll wear the pattern off that glass," said Agatha. Martha jumped, eyes wide. "Mrs. Raisin, you frightened me." "I frighten everyone eventually," Agatha said lightly. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd check how you were managing." "I'm fine," Martha said too quickly. "Just tidying." Agatha leaned against the counter. "You were fond of him, weren't you? Gavin Kent." Martha's lip quivered. "He gave me a chance when I had nothing. People didn't like him because he was clever, that's all." "Clever enough to die mysteriously." Martha looked away. "It was an accident." "Was it?" For a long moment, there was only the sound of the ticking clock behind the bar. Then Martha's voice broke through, small and sharp as glass. "It should have been me who left, not him." Before Agatha could speak, Martha dropped the cloth and fled through the side door, disappearing into the rain. Agatha stood alone, the echo of the words hanging in the air. The bar clock ticked on, steady and unbothered, as if marking time for the living and the dead alike. She exhaled slowly, feeling the chill seep through her bones. "Well," she murmured, glancing at her reflection in the bar's cracked mirror, "whatever he was hiding, someone else is still hiding it better." She turned out the light and stepped into the night, the drizzle whispering against her umbrella. Tomorrow, she promised herself, she'd find out exactly what had been hidden, and why. The Cotswold sky had that washed-out look peculiar to late afternoon, when the light goes thin and everything seems to hover between beauty and boredom. Agatha Raisin, on the other hand, was not hovering. She was seething. Her cottage looked perfectly ordinary from the outside, but inside it bore the traces of a crime. A ransacked handbag, an empty shelf where a ledger had once sat, and a detective in slippers muttering darkly into her cordless phone. "You've been burgled, Mrs. Raisin." Bill Wong's voice sounded faintly incredulous down the line. "Not burgled, targeted," snapped Agatha. "Nothing else taken, not even my good jewellery. Someone broke in and stole that ledger, and you'd better not tell me it's coincidence." "All right," said Bill calmly. "I won't." "Good, because I don't believe in coincidence, or luck, or Inspector Wilkes." Bill sighed, and she could practically hear him rubbing his temples. "I'll come by later. I've only just got back from leave, but—" "You're back? Thank heavens. At least someone competent. That Wilkes couldn't detect gravy on his own shirt." "Mrs. Raisin," Bill said patiently, "try to remember that Wilkes is my superior officer." "Then you have my sympathy," said Agatha. By the time Bill arrived, Agatha had transformed the cottage into what she called her operational headquarters. Notebook on the table, tea brewing, and every cushion plumped to within an inch of its life. Bill took one look at the chaos and sat down carefully, as if afraid to disturb her momentum. "You're sure it was just the ledger?" he asked. "Positive. Whoever it was knew exactly what they were after. The rest of the place is untouched." Bill opened his notebook. "You said the ledger belonged to Gavin Kent?" "Yes, and it wasn't an ordinary set of accounts. It had initials, dates, and payments running into thousands. Charles spotted Tom Pemberley's name, or at least his initials, in one entry." Bill nodded slowly. "That fits with something I heard before my leave. There's been talk in Mercester about an antique smuggling ring operating out of private properties. Small items, high value, shipped abroad as renovation materials." Agatha felt a small thrill. "So Gavin was involved?" "Possibly," Bill said cautiously, "or he stumbled across it. If that ledger recorded illegal transactions, it could explain why someone wanted it back." Agatha sat up straighter. "Then that's our motive. Someone killed him to cover it up." "Our motive," said Bill dryly. "Oh, don't be tedious. You know perfectly well I'm not going to sit back and knit while villains creep about stealing ledgers and murdering landlords." He gave her a long, suffering look. "Just be careful, Agatha. Whoever broke in already knows you're interested." "Danger keeps me young," she said airily. "You're not supposed to find danger invigorating." "Nonsense. You should try it sometime. Better than Pilates." Bill gave up. If you remember anything else and anyone suspicious hanging around, call me and lock your doors." "I always do," said Agatha indignantly. He looked pointedly at the broken latch. "Except when you don't." That evening, as dusk crept in, Agatha wrapped herself in her raincoat and went for a walk to clear her head. The air smelled of damp grass and chimney smoke. Behind the hedgerows, the last of the light caught the slate roofs, turning them silver. She followed the narrow lane that curved past the churchyard and down toward the Hare and Barrel. Halfway along she heard it, the faint crunch of footsteps behind her. She turned sharply. Nothing, just the rustle of leaves. "Who's there?" she called. A shape shifted near the bend, a man, broad-shouldered, wearing a flat cap pulled low. He hesitated, then turned and bolted toward the inn. "Hey!" cried Agatha, breaking into a jog that would have horrified her doctor. "Stop!" But the man was faster, his silhouette vanishing into the gloom. By the time she reached the end of the lane, he was gone. Only the faint echo of running feet remained, swallowed by the mist. "Coward," she muttered, clutching her side. Back home, she phoned Bill again. "You're sure it was a man?" he asked. "Unless Martha's suddenly taken up sprinting and developed a fondness for flat caps." "What did he look like?" "Like a man running away from something. Possibly me." Bill sighed. "I'll have a word with Wilkes. Maybe he'll send someone round to take a statement." "Tell him to send someone who can tell a footprint from a figment," said Agatha, slamming the phone down. The next morning, gossip was already humming like power lines. Len Fisher, landlord of the Red Lion, had been seen sporting a spectacular black eye. "Fell down the cellar steps, he says," Doris Simpson told Agatha cheerfully as they met outside the shop. "Funny how everyone keeps falling down those lately." Agatha wasted no time. She marched straight to the Red Lion, where Len was wiping the bar with unnecessary force. "Morning, Len," she said. "That looks painful." "It's nothing," he grunted. "Slipped on a crate." "Slipped on a crate wearing a flat cap, perhaps." He blinked. "What?" Outside, the sky had gone pewter again, and a chill wind tugged at her scarf. She pulled her coat tighter, mind racing. The broken watch, the cracked mirror, the trembling hands of Martha, threads of something she couldn't yet untangle. When she returned home, Mrs. Bloxby was waiting on the doorstep with a small basket of scones and a worried expression. "Agatha, dear, I heard about the break-in. Are you all right?" "Perfectly fine," said Agatha, "apart from my patience, which has been repeatedly violated." Mrs. Bloxby followed her inside and set down the basket. "I do wish you'd be more careful. Whoever took that ledger might come back. You could stay with me and the vicar for a few nights." "And have him sermonize over breakfast? I'd rather risk burglars." Mrs. Bloxby smiled gently. "You put on such a brave face, but you do enjoy the drama, don't you?" Agatha bristled. "I enjoy justice, not drama." "Of course," said Mrs. Bloxby kindly, which somehow made it worse. After she left, Agatha found herself pacing the sitting room, torn between indignation and affection. It was true, she supposed, that she felt more alive now than she had in weeks. The chase, the danger, the thrill of being needed, even if only by herself, all stirred something restless and warm inside her. By afternoon, Charles arrived unannounced, as he always did, armed with a bottle of white wine and an expression of languid amusement. "I bring news," he declared, kicking off his shoes. "The insurance records for the Hare and Barrel have finally surfaced. Guess how much that mirror was valued at?" 200. £10,000. Agatha whistled. "For one mirror." Apparently it was a family heirloom. Gavin took out a separate policy on it last month. Rather convenient timing, wouldn't you say? "Insurance fraud, perhaps, or it hid something valuable," Charles smiled. "Ah, the famous Raisin intuition. Do remind me again why you didn't join the police." "Because I prefer my coffee hot and my superiors absent," she said crisply. They drank in companionable silence for a while, the afternoon light slipping toward gold. Outside, the village seemed almost peaceful again, though Agatha knew better than to trust tranquillity in Castley. "So," said Charles finally, "what now? You've lost your best piece of evidence, you've managed to antagonize half the village, and someone's prowling around your lane at night." "In other words," said Agatha, "progress." He chuckled. "You're incorrigible, and proud of it." When he left, twilight had settled once more. Agatha tidied the cups, humming absently, feeling that strange mix of satisfaction and uncertainty that came whenever the game deepened. She was just heading upstairs when the flap of her letterbox snapped, And outside the drizzle began again, fine as breath, the sound of Castley keeping its secrets. The morning began with that fragile brightness the Cotswolds sometimes offered after days of drizzle. Sunlight filtered through thin cloud, promising warmth but rarely delivering it. Agatha Raisin stood outside the Hare and Barrel, squinting up at the old building. And outside the drizzle began again, fine as breath, the sound of Castley keeping its secrets. The morning began with that fragile brightness the Cotswolds sometimes offered after days of drizzle. Sunlight filtered through thin cloud, promising warmth but rarely delivering it. Agatha Raisin stood outside the Hare and Barrel, squinting up at the old building. The inn's stone facade looked almost benign in the light, but Agatha had long ago learned not to trust appearances. Charles Frayth leaned against his car, the very picture of aristocratic laziness. "Why, exactly," he asked, "are we breaking into the inn again?" "We are not breaking in," Agatha said, adjusting her handbag strap. "We're investigating. There's a difference." "In legal terms, perhaps not much." "Then it's fortunate you're here to charm us out of trouble," she said sweetly. Martha had given them permission of a sort, a weary nod when Agatha had announced her intention to check the decor for anything suspicious. Still, the bar was empty when they entered, the air cool and faintly perfumed with furniture polish and stale ale. Agatha went straight to the mirror. It dominated the wall behind the counter, tall, gilt-framed, and faintly cracked. "That thing's been bothering me since the night of the reopening," she said. "No one insures a mirror for £10,000 unless it hides something worth more." Charles took a sip from the flask he'd brought for morale. "Perhaps it hides your reflection, darling. That would be priceless." "Very droll," said Agatha. "Now help me lift it." Between them, they managed to ease the frame away from the wall. Dust puffed out, along with the faint, papery scent of old plaster. Behind the mirror, wedged against the wooden backing, was a folded photograph, sepia-toned, brittle with age. Agatha brushed it off carefully. It showed a woman standing in front of the very same inn, decades younger and neater, in a 1920s dress with a cloche hat tilted over one eye. "Well, well," said Charles, "she's rather stylish, a bit like you, only more composed." Agatha ignored that. "This must be the original owner. Look at the background, same windows, same stonework." Martha appeared suddenly in the doorway, a mop in hand. "What are you doing?" Agatha turned, photo still in her fingers. "Just admiring your cleaning job, though you missed this." When Martha saw the photograph, the colour drained from her face. "That's her," she whispered. "Edith Rowe. She owned this place years ago." "And how do you know that?" asked Agatha. "I found old letters when we were renovating. She sold the inn, then left the country. America, I think. No one ever heard from her again." Charles peered at the image. "And what's the gossip this time? Run off with a lover, stolen jewels?" Martha hesitated. "Some say she came back. Others say she didn't go anywhere at all, just disappeared." Agatha's curiosity prickled. "And Gavin Kent, was he interested in this little mystery?" Martha looked down. "He said she was family, his grandmother maybe, but he didn't like talking about her." That detail caught Agatha's attention like a burr on wool. Gavin had never mentioned family, only ambition and cocktails. "May I keep this?" Agatha asked. Martha nodded, though uneasily. As they left the inn, Charles glanced sideways at Agatha. "So, we have a vanished woman, a dead man, and a mirror connecting them. Very poetic. What's your theory?" "If I told you, you'd ruin it with sarcasm," said Agatha. "That's true," he said agreeably. They parted ways at the crossroads, Charles promising to poke around in Mercester's insurance archives, while Agatha headed home with the photograph tucked securely in her bag. By the time she reached her cottage, the village grapevine had outpaced her. Doris Simpson was standing by the postbox, bursting with news. "Agatha, you'll never believe it. Turns out that photo woman, Edith Rowe, might have been Gavin Kent's secret lover." Agatha stopped short. "His lover? She'd be old enough to be his mother." "Well, nobody knew her age, did they? Maybe she had one of those rejuvenating surgeries. They do wonders now." "Oh, for heaven's sake, Doris," Agatha muttered. "Next you'll be telling me she was a vampire." Still, by the time she reached the vicarage for tea, the rumour had already matured. Mrs. Bloxby, ever composed, met her at the door with a faintly apologetic smile. I imagine you've heard the latest gossip, she said gently. I've heard that Carsley has lost its grip on reason, said Agatha, taking off her coat. Someone's decided Gavin Kent was romancing a ghost. Not a ghost, Mrs. Bloxby said mildly, but people do enjoy a love story more than a crime. I don't. I prefer facts. Then you'll be relieved to know I've checked the church records. Edith Rowe was born in 1939. That would make her 86. Agatha blinked. 86? So unless Gavin had a penchant for very mature ladies, that rumour's rubbish. Mrs. Bloxby nodded. Exactly. She sold the inn in the 70s and emigrated. No trace of her since. Perfect, said Agatha. A vanished woman, possibly still alive, with a family connection to a murdered man. Now that's my sort of story. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea. Just promise you'll be careful, Agatha. Honestly, everyone's acting like I'm about to get throttled. I'm not fragile. No, said Mrs. Bloxby kindly, but you do attract trouble, like a cat attracts admiration. Agatha wasn't sure whether to be flattered or insulted. Later that afternoon, as she sat at her kitchen table studying the photograph, Roy Silver burst in without knocking, wearing sunglasses and self-importance. Aggie, I've brought scandal, darling. What, again? Better. Evidence. I was at that dreadful wine bar in Mercester. You know, the one with the synthetic truffle fries, when I overheard Tom Pemberley holding court. He was bragging to some posh bore about the Kent Antiques job gone wrong. Agatha's head snapped up. He said that exactly. Word for word. Then he noticed me listening and switched to talking about golf. So naturally, I pretended to faint to get out of it. You fainted. Elegantly, said Roy, very Blanche du Bois. Agatha resisted the urge to throttle him. So, Gavin and Tom were working together, smuggling antiques. The ledger recorded their transactions, and now Gavin's dead, the mirror's cracked, and everyone's lying. Roy perched on the arm of her chair. Darling, if I didn't know better, I'd think you were enjoying this. Of course I'm not enjoying it, said Agatha. I'm intellectually engaged. That's what murderers always say before Act 3. Out, said Agatha, pointing to the door. He blew her a kiss and flounced out. When silence returned, Agatha studied the photograph again. The woman's expression, half smile, half challenge, seemed oddly familiar. There was something about the tilt of her chin, the way she stood as if daring the world to underestimate her. Kindred spirit, Agatha murmured. Evening descended, soft and damp, turning the village lanes into glistening ribbons. Agatha was dozing in her armchair when a sharp knock startled her awake. She glanced at the clock. Nearly 11. If that's Roy wanting to rehearse his alibi, I'll brain him, she muttered, shuffling to the door. When she opened it, Martha stood on the step, rain dripping from her hair. Her eyes were red, her face blotched with tears. Martha, what on earth? He wasn't who he said he was, Martha whispered. Her voice trembled, every word heavy with fear. Agatha felt a prickle of alarm. Who? Gavin? Martha nodded, eyes wide. Everything about him was a lie. The name, the money, all of it. He found something he shouldn't have, and now... She broke off, glancing nervously over her shoulder at the empty lane. Come in, quickly, Agatha urged. But Martha stepped back. No, I can't stay. They'll know I've talked. Who will? Please, Martha said, her voice barely audible. Don't trust anyone, especially not... A car engine started somewhere down the road. Martha flinched, then turned and ran into the darkness, leaving Agatha staring after her, rain prickling her cheeks. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the engine fading into distance. Then Agatha shut the door, her heart thudding. She picked up the photograph still lying on her table, its edges curling under the lamp's heat. The woman in the picture seemed to meet her gaze knowingly. Well, Agatha said to the empty room, if the dead can keep secrets, so can the living. But for the first time since the case began, she wasn't entirely sure which was which. The rain had returned to Carsley, not the gentle mist that softened the hedgerows, but a determined downpour, the sort that flattened tulips and made everyone swear allegiance to central heating. Agatha Raisin, however, barely noticed. She sat in her armchair, half listening to the radio, half staring at the photograph of Edith Rowe propped on the table. The woman's faint smile seemed to taunt her. Somewhere between that picture and Gavin Kent's corpse lay the truth. and Agatha hated loose ends almost as much as she hated her natural hair colour. A knock came at the door, tentative and uneven. She opened it to find Martha standing there, drenched and pale, her expression brittle with exhaustion. "For heaven's sake, come in before you melt," said Agatha, ushering her inside. Martha clutched a damp handbag to her chest like a life-preserver. "I shouldn't be here. I didn't know where else to go. Sit down. You look ready to faint." "I can't stay long," Martha said, voice trembling. "They might have seen me come." Agatha poured her tea automatically. "They? Who exactly are they? Because if this is another village drama about baking committees, I've reached my limit." Martha gave a short, ragged laugh. "It's not that. It's Gavin, or rather it's Gareth." Agatha frowned. "Who's Gareth?" "Gavin Kent," said Martha. "That wasn't his real name. His name was Gareth Rowe, Edith's son." Agatha froze. "Edith Rowe? The woman in the photograph?" Martha nodded. "Yes, he told me everything the night before he died. He'd come back to reclaim the inn, said it was rightfully his. He believed Edith had hidden something here before she left for America, something valuable. He thought that's why she sold the place so quickly all those years ago." "And the ledger?" asked Agatha sharply. "He found it in the cellar. He said it wasn't money records at all, but a trail. Dates and initials tied to shipments of antiques. Edith's shipments. So she was part of the smuggling ring? Or she was covering for someone? He wasn't sure, but he was obsessed with finding whatever she'd hidden." Agatha leaned forward. "And you helped him?" "I didn't mean to," Martha said miserably. "He made me believe it was harmless, that it was family business. Then that night, the night he died, he told me he'd found it. Said he'd claim what's his before anyone could stop him. I thought he was just drunk. But he wasn't. No." Martha's eyes filled with tears. "He said someone else already knew. He didn't tell me who. Then he went down to the cellar. That was the last time I saw him alive." Agatha felt a chill despite the fire. "And you didn't tell the police any of this?" "They wouldn't have believed me. And if what he found was worth killing for, I didn't want to end up the same way." A car passed outside, its headlights sweeping across the window. Martha stiffened. "That's them," she whispered. "They've been watching me." Agatha rose, moving to the curtain, but the street was empty now except for puddles reflecting the lamplight. When she turned back, Martha was already on her feet, gripping her handbag again. Outside, the rain blurred everything into silver-grey shapes. She could just make out Martha running toward the inn, her hair plastered to her face. Agatha followed, cursing her shoes and the puddles conspiring to drown her dignity. When she reached the inn, the door stood half open, creaking faintly in the wind. She hesitated only a second before stepping inside. The smell hit her first, damp wood, polish, and something metallic beneath. Outside, the rain blurred everything into silver-grey shapes. She could just make out Martha running toward the inn, her hair plastered to her face. Agatha followed, cursing her shoes and the puddles conspiring to drown her dignity. When she reached the inn, the door stood half open, creaking faintly in the wind. She hesitated only a second before stepping inside. The smell hit her first, damp wood, polish, and something metallic beneath. "Martha?" she called. No answer. The bar was dimly lit by a single bulb swinging above the counter. The mirror that had dominated the wall now lay in shattered ruin across the floor, shards glittering like a frozen sea. Charles appeared from the side hallway, soaked and breathless. "I saw your door open and thought I'd better—" "Good Lord, what happened?" "She ran here," said Agatha. "Something scared her. Now she's gone." Charles looked at the wreckage. That mirror didn't fall by itself. Agatha crouched, scanning the floor. A fragment of paper was wedged beneath one of the larger pieces. She teased it free with a fingernail. The words were faint but legible. "Insurance claim. Hidden valuables." "Well," she murmured, "there's your motive." Charles frowned. "Meaning?" "The mirror wasn't just decoration. It contained whatever Edith hid. Gavin must have found out, and someone killed him before he could get to it. Then they came back for the ledger to cover their tracks." "Ingenious," said Charles, "though it raises the tiresome question of what exactly was hidden. Jewels? Documents? A secret recipe for rhubarb jam?" "If you're not going to be useful, at least look dramatic," snapped Agatha. Before he could reply, a familiar voice barked from the doorway. "What in blazes are you doing here?" Bill Wong strode in, coat dripping, eyes flashing. He took in the scene, Agatha crouched by broken glass, Charles looking guilty by association. "You've ruined a crime scene," he said. "It was already ruined," Agatha protested. "We were just trespassing," Bill cut in. "Again." Charles spread his hands. "Technically, we were conducting civic-minded research." "Oh, do shut up," said Bill. "I told you to leave this alone." Agatha rose, bristling. "And let you bumble about while people vanish? Martha was here not 10 minutes ago. She told me everything." "Everything?" Bill folded his arms. "Such as?" "Gavin Kent wasn't Gavin Kent. He was Gareth Rowe, Edith Rowe's son. He reopened the inn to find something his mother hid. The ledger, the mirror, it's all connected." Bill exhaled slowly, fighting the urge to roll his eyes. "And your evidence for this astonishing claim?" "My ears," said Agatha. "She confessed it herself." "And where is this mysterious witness now?" "Gone. Someone scared her off. We saw headlights just before she ran." Bill rubbed his forehead. "Agatha, do you realize how this looks? You keep turning up at crime scenes before the police do. If you weren't such a terrible liar, I'd arrest you on principle." "You'd miss me terribly," said Agatha. "Yes," said Bill, "but only briefly." He crouched, examining the mirror shards. "We'll have forensics sweep this. If what you're saying is true, it might have had a compartment. Though why anyone hides things behind furniture when safes exist is beyond me." "It's romantic," said Charles, "all that mystery and concealment." "It's daft," said Bill. Agatha ignored them both. She was studying the paper fragment again. Insurance claim, hidden valuables. The ink had blurred, but the corner bore part of a date, just last month. "Bill," she said quietly, "the claim was recent. Someone insured this mirror not as decor, but as a container. They knew what was inside." Bill's expression darkened. "Which means whoever killed Gareth Rowe had access to the policy details." "Exactly. And that narrows the list." Charles tilted his head. "To whom? Tom Pemberley, the antiques dealer? He'd know an undervalued asset when he saw one." "Or Martha," Agatha said softly. "If she was helping Gareth search, maybe she knew more than she admitted. Maybe she came back tonight to retrieve whatever was left." Bill straightened. "If that's the case, she's in danger. Or she's running because she's guilty." "Either way," said Agatha, "I intend to find her before someone else does." Bill shot her a look. "Promise me you'll let the police handle it." "Absolutely," said Agatha with her most innocent smile. "You're lying," he said flatly. "Of course I am," she replied. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the windows as if applauding her defiance. Bill sighed. "I'll have officers search the area. Go home, Agatha. Get some sleep." "Sleep?" she said. "When a murderer's loose and a woman's missing. Not likely." Charles grinned. "I'll drive you home before you start interrogating the hedgerows." On the way back, the village lanes gleamed with puddles. Agatha sat in silence, her reflection ghosted faintly in the passenger window. The words from the paper repeated in her mind. Insurance claim, hidden valuables. "Do you think Martha's dead?" Charles asked softly. "No," said Agatha, staring out at the blurred lights. "Not yet. She's too frightened to be dead. Fear keeps people alive longer than courage does." Charles gave a low whistle. "That's morbidly profound. You should put it on a mug. Shut up and drive." When he dropped her off, the rain had eased into mist again, wrapping Carsley in its quiet, watchful shroud. Agatha stood for a moment outside her gate, breathing the damp air. The photograph of Edith Rowe weighed heavily in her handbag, and for the first time she wondered if the smiling woman had been the beginning or the end of it all. Inside, she hung her coat by the fire and poured herself a whiskey instead of tea. Her reflection caught in the window pane, distorted slightly, like a face glimpsed through old glass. "Insurance, inheritance, hidden valuables," she murmured, "and a missing woman, always something bloody hiding." She raised the glass in a toast to the empty room, to vanity and secrets. They keep the world turning. But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the uneasy sense that someone, somewhere, was still watching, and that the mirror's secret had not yet finished with her.